She wasn't supposed to be a hero. She wasn't even supposed to be on the battlefield. Nurses don't storm trenches. They don't run into gunfire. They work in hospitals where there are sterile white walls, clean sheets, and at least some hope that a wounded person will survive. But on a cold November morning in 1944, Lieutenant Mary Harrington crawled out of a trench and walked straight into machine gun fire. Alone, unarmed, without cover. And before that day ended, she would carry 47 wounded soldiers from the line of fire, each one on her own shoulders. This story is almost forgotten. Her name isn't in textbooks, but 47 men knew it by heart until the end of their days. And now you'll learn why. Mary Harrington was born in 1921 in a small Ohio town, an ordinary American family. Her father worked in a factory, her mother kept house. Mary was the eldest of 3 children. Even in school, she knew what she wanted to be, a nurse. Not because it was a romantic profession, but because she couldn't bear to see anyone suffer. When the neighbor's boy fell from a tree and broke his arm, 13-year-old Mary herself splinted it with sticks and a scarf, while the adults ran for a doctor. The arm healed properly. The doctor said, "You have a talent, girl." In 1940, she enrolled in the School of Nursing at the University of Ohio. She studied well, not an honors student, but persistent, the kind who doesn't give up even when her hands tremble with fatigue after a 12-hour shift. And then war broke out. December 7th, 1941, Pearl Harbor. America entered World War II. Mary was 20 years old. She could have stayed home, finished her studies, found a job at a local hospital, married, had children. But she enlisted in the Army. "Why are you going there?" her mother asked with tears in her eyes. "Because they need nurses there, Mom, and I am a nurse." Military training for nurses was tough. Forced marches, training under fire, applying tourniquets against the clock, evacuating the wounded amidst the sound of explosions. But it was still a game. Training grenades, blank cartridges, wounded who would later get up and go for coffee. Real war was completely different. In 1943, Mary was promoted to lieutenant and assigned to the 45th Infantry Division, one of the most combat-experienced divisions in the U.S. Army. They advanced through Sicily, Salerno, Anzio. By autumn 1944, the division was fighting in northern Italy. The Apennine Mountains, rain, knee-deep mud, German positions on every hill. Mary worked in a field hospital, a tent strung between trees. The wounded were brought in by jeeps, on stretchers, sometimes simply carried on shoulders. Blood, shrapnel, burns, severed limbs. She learned not to cry. Learned to work when her hands were slick with blood. Learned to look a dying man in the eyes and say, "Everything will be fine," even when she knew it was a lie. But nothing could have prepared her for what would happen on November 18th. November 8th, 1944, northern Italy, near the town of Fuegenia. The weather was awful. Rain had turned the roads into rivers of mud. Visibility was only about 30 meters. The fog was so thick that Germans could be 50 meters away, and you wouldn't see them. Mary was on her morning duty, her usual routine, checking on the wounded, changing dressings, distributing morphine to those crying out in pain. And then the order came. Lieutenant Harrington, prepare for evacuation. The front line is retreating. We need to move the wounded. Evacuation was always a risk, but they had done it dozens of times, loading the wounded onto ambulance jeeps and leaving before the front line shifted. That day, 12 people went with Mary, drivers, medics, and a few covering soldiers. They moved along a narrow dirt road along the slope. The jeeps got stuck in the mud. The wounded groaned. Mary sat in the back of one of the trucks, holding an IV drip over a soldier with an abdominal wound. And then silence exploded. An MG-42, a German machine gun, firing at 1,200 rounds per minute, a sound soldiers called the buzzsaw. The first burst ripped through the cab of the front jeep. The driver died instantly. The vehicle veered into a ditch. The second burst hit the truck. Mary instinctively ducked. Bullets pierced the canvas like paper. Someone shouted, "Everyone down! Take cover!" But the wounded couldn't move. They lay in the truck beds, defenseless, bound by bandages and splints. Mary jumped out of the truck and dove into a drainage ditch beside the road. Mud, water up to her waist. Bullets whistled overhead. She looked around. 3 medics were dead. 4 were wounded. The others were somewhere in cover, but she couldn't see them. And 47 wounded soldiers, unable to move, lay on the open road under machine gun fire. Mary Harrington was alone. When bullets whistle overhead and the ground explodes around you, you have 2 seconds to make a decision. Stay in cover, or crawl out to where death awaits you with mechanical precision. Mary looked at the road. The truck was 15 meters away. The wounded inside were screaming. Someone was calling her name. She could have stayed, waited for reinforcements. It would have been reasonable. No one would have judged her. But Mary Harrington was a nurse. And nurses don't wait. They go where the wounded are. She climbed out of the ditch. The machine gun opened fire again. A burst passed a meter from her. Mud erupted like a fountain. Mary dropped to her stomach. She crawled. 2 meters. Stop. Another 2 meters. Bullets tore at the earth around her. She heard them whistle, a sound that embeds itself in memory forever. She reached the truck. The first wounded man was a sergeant with a shrapnel wound to his leg. He couldn't walk. Mary grabbed him by the straps of his tactical vest and began to drag him. 70 kilograms. Mud. Slippery hands. She dragged him along the ground, inch by inch. The machine gun rattled. Bullets scraped against rocks near her head. 10 meters. 9. 8. She dragged him to the ditch and lowered him in. He was alive. She turned around and crawled back. What happens when you drag a wounded person under fire? You don't think. You don't have time to think. You just move. Grab, drag, crawl, fall, get up, crawl again. Your heart pounds so hard it feels like it's about to burst. Hands tremble, lungs burn, feet slip. But you don't stop, because if you stop, someone will die. A second. A third, a 10th. Mary returned again and again. She dragged soldiers by their arms, by their legs, by their collars. She pulled some on her back. She hoisted others onto her shoulders. Some were unconscious. Some screamed in pain. One begged her to leave him. Save the others. I won't survive. She didn't listen. The machine gun fired continuously. The Germans knew someone was evacuating the wounded and deliberately targeted the road, preventing access to the trucks. But Mary was a small target. She crawled low, moved in short bursts, used every bump, every rock as cover. Bullets passed by mere centimeters. Once a stone fragment cut her cheek. Another time a bullet pierced the sleeve of her jacket without touching her skin. She did not stop. It happened on her 23rd rescue. She was dragging a corporal with a chest wound, a heavy guy, about 90 kilograms. A machine gun burst passed very close. One bullet grazed her thigh, skidding across the skin, leaving a jagged scratch. The second pierced her sleeve and scratched her forearm. Mary didn't notice immediately. Adrenaline dulled the pain. Only when she had dragged the soldier to the ditch did she see blood on her uniform. One of the medics tried to bandage her. "Leave it," she said. "It's nothing. There are 20 more people out there." And she crawled back. By the end of the 3rd hour, Mary could barely stand. Her uniform was soaked with mud and blood. Her boots had fallen apart. Her hands trembled so much she couldn't make a fist. Her voice was gone. She had been yelling at the wounded for so long, telling them to hold on. But there was one last one. Private James Collins, 19 years old, a back wound. He lay right by the truck, under direct fire. Mary crawled to him. "I'll get you," she rasped. "Hold on." She grabbed him by his straps and dragged. The machine gun opened fire again. The burst passed so close that Mary felt the hot air from the bullets scorch her face. She didn't let go. A meter. Another meter. She dragged him to the ditch and collapsed. When reinforcements finally broke through the German line, they found Mary lying next to the last wounded soldier. She was unconscious. Her uniform was torn, her boots completely destroyed, her hands covered in scrapes and cuts. Her voice didn't return for several days. But all 47 soldiers she had carried out were alive. Every single one of them. When Mary regained consciousness, the first thing she asked was, "How are the wounded?" "All are alive, Lieutenant, thanks to you." She nodded and asked for water. Her commander, Colonel William Darby, wrote in his report, "If courage has a face, it was her face that day." Lieutenant Harrington displayed a level of selflessness and heroism that I have seen only a few times throughout the entire war. She risked her life 47 times consecutively and never stopped once. A month later, Mary Harrington became the first nurse in World War II history to receive the Silver Star for valor in combat. The award ceremony took place in a field hospital. A general pinned the medal on her chest. Journalists tried to interview her. "Lieutenant Harrington, you are a hero. What did you feel when you went under fire?" She looked at them calmly. "I felt that I was a nurse, and that the wounded needed help." "But you could have died." "Yes, but they certainly would have died if I hadn't gone." After the war, Mary returned to Ohio. She didn't become a celebrity, write memoirs, or appear on television. She simply became a nurse again. She worked at a veterans' hospital, tending to those who returned from the war broken, physically and mentally. Many of them knew her story. When she entered a ward, old soldiers would rise as much as they were able. "That's her," they'd whisper to newcomers. "She's the one." 47 men. Mary married in 1948, and had 2 children. She worked until she was 70 and passed away in 2003 at the age of 82. More than 100 people attended her funeral. Among them were 13 old men in worn military uniforms. These were the ones she had carried out, the ones who had survived because of her. One of them, James Collins, the very last one, gave a speech. "I shouldn't have lived to see 20, he said, but I lived to 83. I have a wife, children, grandchildren, all because one day a little nurse wasn't afraid to crawl out under fire and pull me to safety. Mary always said she was just doing her job, but her job is the reason 47 families didn't receive telegrams that day. She was a hero, even if she never called herself one." Today, few know Mary Harrington's name. Her story isn't in textbooks. No films have been made about her. Her medal rests in a small museum in Ohio, on a shelf among dozens of others. But 47 people knew her name by heart, and their children, and their grandchildren. War creates heroes, but not all heroes stand with weapons in hand. Some heroes crawl through mud under bullets, not to kill, but to save. Some heroes do the impossible, not because they are fearless, but because they cannot do otherwise. Mary Harrington was a small woman, weighing 50 kilograms, without a weapon, without body armor. But she proved stronger than a machine gun, because courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is a nurse under fire, going where everyone else is running from. Thank you for listening to this story. Remember the names of those who saved lives. Subscribe to learn more real stories of World War II heroism.